born and raised in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And actually, I just finished my PhD this year, and I just started working at the University of Saskatchewan. My research is in a little bit of computer science and a little bit of mathematics. And so what I'm doing actually is looking at different types of data. So one project looks at opioid addiction data, and the other one is actually looking at COVID-19 data. And what I'm doing is using a little bit of modeling to try and predict, how diseases spread, and for the opioid problem, trying to predict when people have opioid addictions. So I was born and raised in Canada. I've been here for a while. When I was younger, in high school, I took a couple math competitions. They're fun because you get to learn how hard math can be. And at least when I took them with other school classmates, and it was fun to work on problems, preparing for the exam together. So I guess we'll just get started now. So this session is mainly designed to prepare you for the COMC. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks. I'm going to go through some example problems, maybe give you some suggestions on how to write math exams if you haven't already. Okay, and again, I'll keep my eye on the chat box. So if you have questions or anything as I'm going through, feel free to type them in. I'll try and keep an eye on them, and I'll address them that way. Okay, so firstly, I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming. Taking a math exam can sometimes be intimidating, or maybe it's something that it's extra work and you're not really interested. So just to see this many people here is awesome, and congratulations for choosing to take this COMC, which is a very, it's a nationwide mathematics exam challenge. So yeah, it's great to just see you here, and thank you for attending this session. So the COMC is Canada's premier national mathematics competition. With any student, it's open to any student with an interest and a grasp of high school math. So the purpose of the COMC is to encourage students to explore, discover, learn more about mathematics and problem solving. So it's kind of like an extra challenge, I would like to say. So chances are, if you're here, you don't actually hate math, you actually enjoy it. And so that's good that you are interested in taking an exam and working on a challenge, and you'll find that math competitions kind of push your limits and make you kind of bring out the best in you. They really push you and see how far your true potential is. This webinar is also designed to help. This webinar is designed to help participants prepare for the COMC, and it's also part of the CMS's Closing the Gap initiative. So what I'm going to do is cover kind of four main points here. I'm first going to talk about the potential subjects of study that could be on the exam. Then I'm going to talk about some problem-solving strategies, and then we're going to go over a couple practice examples. And I'll actually show you where, if you don't already know, there's actually so many practice examples out there. There's some previous exams. So I'll show you how to access those. And then we'll end with just some general advice for writing math competitions. Okay. So just a little bit more about the COMC. This year it'll be held on Thursday, October 29th, so a week from today. The COMC has three parts. So it has a part A, a part B, and a part C, and more increasing difficulty. In part A, solutions usually do not require you to show much work. Sometimes you can just do them in your head. They shouldn't take you as much time either, and that's kind of the point that I'll bring up later, is that part A questions will take less time than part B questions, and part B questions will take less time than part C questions in general. Okay, so then part B questions, they begin to draw on more knowledge and have some more challenging aspects. Chances are you will have to kind of work out your solution on pencil and paper, and it'll require more work. And then part C are where the really difficult questions are. These problems require work to be shown and involve arguments to support the answer. So part C are definitely the ones that, again, are very challenging for you, and they'll push you, and they're usually the most interesting. So having a strong mathematical foundation is essential to having success in the COMC. So chances are, if you are here, you've had success in math, and that's good. And that's kind of, you always want to go into a competition with a good, mathematical foundation. It'll help you have success. Okay, so most of the problems on the COMC will be based on the mathematics taught in secondary schools, so in high school, okay? And so here's a list of potential subjects. So it's just nice to have this list just to make sure that you kind of understand and are familiar with all of these topics, okay? So if there's something on here that you haven't seen before, you're not sure what that is, okay, then that's an opportunity for you to look into those topics and make sure you understand what they are, okay? So again, these are potential subjects. You're not going to need to know everything, but chances are that you could know, there could be a question on each of these subjects, okay? So it's good to just make sure you go through this list and make sure you understand, at least the fundamentals of each topic. And if you have time, you can actually kind of refresh your memory about some of this stuff, depending on which grade you are or what kind of, where you are in Canada, okay? You might have had different amounts of exposure to different number of these topics. Okay, so this is just saying, hopefully you've learned about most of these subjects during your education. Again, I'll post these slides so you don't have to write all those down or anything like that. If there are subjects that you're unfamiliar with, okay, I would suggest taking some time to become familiar with these subjects. And if you are familiar with the subject, doing a quick refresher, just reminding yourself what some of the terms are, or just going back through and just making sure you remember what that topic is about, that doesn't hurt either. And so if you are looking for some extra resources, there's 2 open resources. They're free online open resources that I find are fairly useful. They're fairly well put together. And so there's 2 links here. One's the CK12 website. Again, this is an open resource. It doesn't just have math. It actually has lots of different subjects, so it's actually really good. And then there's also the OpenStax website, which is basically a bunch of textbooks. And so they have a math section there. You should be able to find each of the previous topics in one of these learning resources. So if you need to look this up, or if you want some more resources or something like that, feel free to check out these 2 websites. All right, so Tiger asks, how long is this? Good question. Hopefully it'll be about 45 minutes to an hour, so we'll see. Okay, so those are some potential subjects of study. Next, I'll just talk about some problem-solving strategies. So there's lots of different ideas about how to attack problem-solving. Problem-solving is probably the toughest part of math because there's no real just straight algorithm on how to solve a problem-solving strategy, or how to attack a problem, or like a word problem, okay? And so these are very general steps, but hopefully if you use these steps and you can kind of follow these steps, usually they can help you. So if you have a little bit of structure to your approach to the question, usually that can help you, increases the chance of you answering the question correctly, okay? And so I kind of broke it down into 4 steps. Again, this isn't like, this is how you must do questions, okay? This is just an idea of an outline of what you could follow in order to approach a question, okay? So the first step is to make sure you understand the problem, okay? So pretty much all of the questions on the COMC are word problems. So you have to make sure you understand the problem. So understand what you're given in the question, okay? Understand what the question is asking. Okay, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Next, you could create potential plans to solve the problem. Okay, so once you kind of understand the problem and you comprehend it, you want to think of, okay, how could I possibly solve this problem? Okay, and this is usually the toughest part, figuring out what you actually have to do. Okay, and so what part of math or what part of problem solving do I need to use in order to attack this problem? Okay, and so that's why you want to try and lay out some potential plans. Notice that I say potential plans with plural with an S because it's usually best if you have multiple possible plans, okay? Because chances are your first thought or your first thing you try may not work, okay? Third step would be to choose a plan and implement it. So choose one of your plans, start working, right? And is it going to get you the correct answer right away? Maybe, maybe not, okay? But at least choose one of your plans and just start working. Start playing around with the problem, see what you can get from implementing one of your plans. And then number 4 is reflect on the problem. So see what you get when you implement the plan. Did you answer the question? Even if it didn't get you the correct answer, okay, did it provide some more useful information on how to solve the problem? Okay. Always go back, look at what you got, and then kind of revisit, start looking at your different plans, okay? Work through the question. So just to be clear, you do not need to explicitly state or follow these steps on the exam. These are just some general guidelines that may help you solve the problems, right? So if you kind of think about, okay, I'm going to make sure I understand the problem first, and then I'm going to think about some possible plans to solve this problem, and then I'm going to start actually using those plans, okay? So just to go into each of these a bit more, understanding the problem. So what can you do to understand the problem? Well, you can read and reread the problem. So it usually helps to read it a couple times, okay? If you just read through a problem once, sometimes you don't get all the information. You're not even sure exactly the situation. You're not sure what the problem's asking. One that really helps, I think, is paraphrasing the problem. So in other words, just rewrite the problem or explain it to yourself in some other words, okay? That makes sure that you understand exactly what this problem is asking. Visualize. So this one's another good point is, write down the key information or find the key information in the question. Sometimes it helps to draw a picture or a diagram. And also another note is to make sure you make note of the units. So for example, if you're dealing with kilometers or if you're dealing with time in seconds or hours, okay, make sure you make note of the units, and that if it's asking for something in a different unit, make sure you use those correct units. Another part of understanding the problem is you could use variables to represent missing quantities that seem important. So if you're going through the question and it might say something, but it doesn't actually give you a value, you can just let it be a variable. Okay, so maybe we'll let X be the amount of food I ate today. Okay, so let's just, if you're going through the question, it kind of says something, but doesn't give you an actual value, sometimes it's useful to let that value be a variable. And lastly, of course, make sure you identify what the problem is actually asking, okay? For number 2, creating a potential plan. So sometimes it is helpful if you determine which subjects you need to solve the problem, okay? So if you see, for example, a lot of things talking about angles and maybe there's a picture of a circle and a triangle and stuff, okay, you're probably gonna need some geometry and some trigonometry, right? So think about what kind of subjects in math can I use to attack this problem? Okay, if you think of some common things that are used in geometry, okay, or in trigonometry, maybe that'll help you attack that problem. Think about if you've seen a similar problem before. And so one thing I'll talk about later is when preparing for an exam, it's really pretty much the best way to prepare for this type of competition is do a lot of problems, okay? Expose yourself to as many problems as possible so that when you're actually doing the test, maybe you've seen a similar problem before, okay? And if you happen to see a similar problem, that really helps you attack a problem. Consider different actions. So in math, you can do a lot of things, but usually it comes down to computing something or simplifying, or maybe you can use an equation. Maybe we need to make a model or diagram, a table or a chart. Maybe we have to work backwards, okay? So consider all of these possible things when attacking the question, okay? And for problems part B or C, you'll probably need more than one of the above actions. Okay, so usually there are multiple steps to the problem for the questions of problem in part B or C. Okay, so like I said, the step 2 here, creating potential plans, is usually the most difficult one. What do I actually have to do to solve this question? Okay, so it's really useful to think of all possible things, kind of jot down some ideas, okay, because usually when working on these questions, what you think of first may not work right away. Okay, choosing a plan and implementing it. Okay, so when you're working on your actual question, make sure you show all of your work. Okay, include partial solutions. Okay, and don't erase anything, right? If you work through something and you say, oh, that didn't work, well, maybe that'll be useful later, or maybe that tells you something else about the problem. Okay, so make sure you show all of your work. Okay, and keep everything neat and organized so that you're not just, if you need to find something later, you're like, oh, I think I calculated that earlier. Okay, you can go back and look at your work. So save all your results or data that you obtain while implementing the plan. And probably the most important, be patient and persistent, okay? These math exams are designed to be hard, okay? So they're not gonna be super easy. So don't get discouraged if your plan doesn't work immediately, okay? It's gonna take a while, try and work through the question, be patient when you're working through questions. Okay, and then lastly, reflect on the problem. So chances are your first attempt may not work. If your plan does not work, go back and try another potential plan, right? So in step 2, hopefully you got some different ideas down. If it doesn't work, okay, don't give up. Try something else. Remember, don't erase your work. Try something different. Reflect for other possible strategies. So maybe your work told you something, but maybe you didn't quite get there, and maybe you can think of a different plan based on what you worked out. Sometimes results from an earlier plan will also help when implementing a different plan. Okay, so sometimes there's more than one plan that works also. If you do get something that looks like the answer, okay, make sure you check your work afterwards. Look for small errors, make sure that your answer makes sense, and make sure you are actually answering the question being asked in the very end. Okay. Okay, so I talked about some subjects of study. I talked about some possible problem-solving strategies, kind of 4 steps that you could kind of follow. So let's just look at some different practice exams, or sorry, practice examples from previous exams. Okay, so I'll give you a link later to access some previous questions and not, but maybe just think about this question. So this is a question from part A from last year's exam, okay? And so it says, Sean's password to unlock his phone is 4 digits long, made up of 2 5s and 2 3s. How many different possibilities are there for Sean's password? Okay. So maybe we'll take a bit of time, think about this to yourself, and think about the 4 steps earlier. So let's first make sure we understand the problem. Then we can think about some different plans on how to attack this problem. And then we can actually try and implement one of those plans. Okay. And if you can do this one in your head, so remember this is part A, hopefully maybe you can do this just in your head, okay, or just jotting some stuff down. So it looks like a couple people already have it in chat, which is good. All right, so what I'll do is I'll kind of just go through the question, okay? And yeah, the answer is 6. Okay, so how did you obtain that answer? Or choose 2, okay? So there's a couple ways we could do it. Yeah, so let me just go through what I would put. Okay, so I'm gonna follow my 4 steps, but again, for a question like this, you might not have to do that, right? Again, it's just a general guideline. If you're struggling with a question, just go back, make sure I understand the problem first, then think about some plans and then implement them, okay? So to understand the problem, well, I'm gonna rephrase the problem, okay? So I basically have 4 blanks here, right? I need to fill them in with a 5, a 5, a 3, and a 3, okay? So, and we want to know how many different combinations there are, right? That's what the question's asking, okay? And so what could I do? Well, I could just go through all the combinations, right? I could just fill in, well, I could start with 5, 5, 3, 3. I could then go 5, 3, 5, 3. Then I could try 5, 3, 3, 5, go through all the possible combinations, right? And because I don't have too many numbers, I can actually do that. That's just called the brute force method, right? I could just try putting in different things, and I could try and get all of them, right? Literally write all of them out, okay? And so for part A, sometimes that is a valid option, okay? Okay, or we could use combinations and permutations, okay? So when you look at this question, you might, as soon as you have something and you want to like fill something and order them and you have to count how many there are, any kind of counting thing, you should automatically think of, okay, can I use a combination or permutation, okay? So choose a plan and implement it. Okay, so if I want to do the brute force, I could just literally go through and do each one, right? So 3, 3, 5, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, move the 3s and 5s around until I have all possible combinations and just count how many I get. Okay, and if I did it this way, well, then I would just have to, afterwards, I just want to make sure that you actually answer the question, right? So to make sure that we have all possible combinations, so I didn't miss any, and then make sure that we actually answer the question. So my answer is not going to be 3, 3, 5, 5, and 3, 5, 3, 5, and 3, 5, 5, 3. Okay, the question didn't ask to actually give the combinations. The question asked how many different combinations there are. So just make sure you answer the question in the very end. There are 6 different possibilities for Sean's password. Okay. Okay, so then another way we could have used if we wanted to use combinations, well, we noticed that if we just chose the locations for the 5s, okay, then the 3s are automatically determined, okay, because if we choose where the 5s go, then the 3s automatically have to fill in those other spaces, right? So basically we have 4 choices and we have 2 things to fill in, 2 things to choose, okay? So that's basically 4, choose 2, okay? So 4, choose 2 is just 6. Okay, so again, there's sometimes multiple ways to attack a problem. Okay, just make sure, try different things, and make sure you answer the question in the very end. Okay, let's take a quick look at another question. This is a Part B question from 2019. And so let's read it out. We have John, and he walks from home to school with a constant speed. Okay, he has a sister named Joan. She bikes twice as fast. Okay, and so the distance between their home and school is 3 kilometers. And if Joan leaves 15 minutes after John, then they arrive at the school at the same time. Okay, and they want to know the walking speed of John. Okay, so here there's lots of information, and so we want to make sure that we, comprehend each of the information given. Okay, and so usually it's easiest if you kind of go over and write out what you're given, right? Identify the key information. Okay, or we can paraphrase. Okay, try to reword this question in a way such that we make sure that we understand. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. Again, this is going to be a question B, a Part B question. So it's going to take a little bit longer, right? You're going to actually have to probably write out some things with pencil and paper and so on. Okay. So a couple guesses, 5, 10, 6, 6. Okay, good. All right, so why don't I go through it with you? Okay, so again, I'm gonna follow my 4 steps, okay? So make sure we understand the problem, okay? So I know that Joan is traveling twice as fast as John, and they both have to travel this 3 kilometer distance, right? And so we don't know the speed of John, right? We're just told that Joan is twice as fast. So usually when you see something like that, okay, if you see somebody's traveling twice as fast, or this guy has twice as much, or this guy has 5 times as much money as this other person, or something like that, okay, you probably want to let a variable be that number, right? And so if we let x be the speed of John, well, then the speed of Joan will be 2x, right? 2 times x. It'll be twice as fast. Okay. And so basically, since the question's asking what is the walking speed of John, we just have to solve for x. If we can solve for x somehow, that tells us our answer. Okay. So what else are we told in the question? We're told that it takes Joan 15 minutes less time to travel those 3 kilometers. Okay. So whatever John's time is, Joan's time is going to be 15 minutes less. Okay. And so we want to find the speed of John, okay? And one other thing to note here, right? Note that the time is given in minutes, right? So here it says 15 minutes, but our answer we're asked for is in kilometers per hours, okay? So be careful with your units, right? So always do a little check, okay? This measurement is in minutes, but I will need my answer to be in a time unit of hours, okay? So just note that you can convert your 15 minutes into 0.25 hours, right? I just take 15 divided by 60, 60 minutes in an hour, that gives me 0.25 hours. Okay, so what can we do? Well, we could try and set up an equation from the information given, okay? Set up some kind of equation, and like I said earlier, if we can somehow find out what x is, then that tells us what John's speed is, right? So I just need to find out what can I let equal to each other so that I can solve for x. Okay. All right, so let's choose a plan and implement it. So we're going to try and set up an equation. All right. Well, what we were told is that John's time must be 0.25 hours longer than Joan's time. Okay. So if I take John's time and I let it equal to 0.25 plus Joan's time, okay, then I have an equation, right? I'm told that two things are equal, so that will let me make an equation, okay? And so since I know velocity is distance over time, we also know that time is distance over velocity just by rearranging this formula. And so if we're talking about time, then John's time is going to be distance over velocity. So John has to travel 3 kilometers and his velocity is x. Okay. Joan's time, Joan also has to travel 3 kilometers and her velocity is 2x. Okay. And so this gives me the time of John, this gives me the time of Joan, and now I can set up an equation. Okay. So now since John's time must be 0.25 hours longer than Joan's time, we have this equation here, right? So if I take John's time, that's going to be the same thing as adding 0.25 hours to Joan's time. Okay. We can then go ahead and solve this equation for x, and that will be our answer. Okay. So just to reflect, make sure we answer the question, right? So we can say John's walking speed is 6 kilometers per hour. Again, include your units, make sure we have our units correctly. So we can make a check to make sure this, also makes sense. So we can go back and make sure that, okay, well, if John is traveling 6 kilometers an hour, that means Joan is traveling twice that, okay? We can figure out how long it takes each of them, make sure all the data makes sense and everything makes sense in the question, right? And so if John is traveling 6 kilometers per hour, it would take him distance over velocity, which is 3 over 6, which is 0.5 hours to travel the 3 kilometers, right? So John, it would take him 0.5 hours. We can do the same thing for Joan. Since she's traveling 12 kilometers per hour, it would take her 3 divided by 12, which is 0.25 hours. And so just as required, we have that John's time is 0.25 hours longer than Joan's time. Okay. So that hopefully gives you an idea of part A and part B questions. I don't have a part C question just because it would probably take too long. Okay. But the good news is that CMS is really nice and they give you all of the previous, well, maybe not all the previous exams, but a lot of the previous exams. Okay. So what you can do is familiarize yourself with the potential subjects of study and then do a lot of practice problems. So that's kind of the #1 tip that people give for doing math competitions. Do a lot of the practice problems, okay? Because the more exposure you can get to the different types of problems, okay, you get an idea of the different types of tips and tricks and little formats that you have to follow in order to answer the question, okay? So #1, my recommendation for you, familiarize yourself with the potential subjects of study first. So go through that list of things, make sure you understand all of those topics. Okay, at least you have a little bit of familiarity with each of them. Okay. Next, do a lot of practice problems. Okay, so again, I'll give you the link to these slides, and maybe some of you have already seen these on the CMS website. Okay, but what they give you is problems for previous years, also with the solutions. Okay, so basically, for a lot of the previous years, they give you the exact test and the solutions to them. Okay, this is kind of invaluable in your preparation. The more of these you can do here at this link, the better off you'll be. Okay. CMS also had problems of the week. Okay, so in 2020, the problems of the week can be located at this link. It's through this Wisdom-y. Okay, so you just have to log into this place and you can actually access all the 2020 problems of the week. Okay, so if you haven't been doing them already, CMS actually offers all these problems of the week, which you can check out. Again, the more problems you can do, the better off you're going to be. And there's also previous years as problems of the week. If you go to this link here and you scroll down to the bottom of the page, they have a bunch of the previous years problems of the week. Okay, and so again, these are Very, very valuable. Again, this is what I would recommend. Number one, do as many practice problems as you can. Okay. So these practice problems will expose you to the different types and formats of the problems. Sometimes there are little tricks that are needed. You can just get a really good idea of what to expect on the test. Okay. And sometimes this year's questions will be similar to a previous year's question, right? They're not going to be the exact same, but there's going to be similarities, right? As you're working through these questions, if you get stuck on a question, okay, make sure you understand the solution. And if you don't understand what they did in the solution, okay, seek help from a teacher or other resource, okay? And even if you just redo the question, even though you know the solution, if you just put the solution aside, redo the question on your own without looking at the solution again, that actually helps reinforce how to do that question, okay? So I just want to reiterate, my number one tip for you, do lots of practice problems, okay? That's honestly the best way to prepare. Another thing for writing math competitions is do not get discouraged, okay? These math competitions are designed to be very difficult, okay? You just want to do the best you can. Are you going to get them all right? Well, maybe if you're very, 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 very smart and you're like the 1%, then yeah, maybe you could get all the questions, but chances are you're not going to be able to get all the questions, okay? You just want to do the very best that you can. So don't get discouraged if you're going through, you're struggling, you're not getting very many questions, okay? That's to be expected, so don't get down on yourself. Another point is make sure you manage your time, okay? So think of time as a resource, okay? The more time you can spend on something, the better chance you have on getting a question, okay? So time is like a resource, okay? So you want to make sure you manage this resource properly. So you'll have 2.5 hours, which is 150 minutes. So before you even go in, plan out how much time you think you're going to spend on each section, okay? So I just gave what maybe I thought would be good. Maybe if you spend 40 minutes on part A, 50 minutes on part B, and 60 minutes on part C. Maybe in reality, part A won't take that long. So maybe about 30 minutes. You can maybe put those extra 10 minutes towards part C, okay? And you can get an idea of this by doing the previous year's exams, okay? Make sure you have a clock nearby when you're writing your exam. So either watch or just make sure there's a clock in the room. Keep an eye on the time, okay? You don't want to spend too much time on part A and then not leave yourself enough time for later on. And just a note, if you are writing the exam online, you will have additional time to upload your solutions, okay? If you do have time, okay, a big part of math is making small, silly mistakes. That happens to every one of us, right? So if you have time, make sure you go back, check through your work, look for little small mistakes. And if you get stumped on a question, don't be afraid to skip the question and come back to it later, okay? There are these questions sometimes that are lots of wording and you're not really getting anywhere and they're just taking up time and you're not getting anything done. Okay, just move on, come back later. Okay, make sure you can spend enough time addressing another question that you might be able to solve, right? Another thing you could do is take an old exam under exam conditions, okay? So like pretend you're writing the exam, right? Take an old exam that you haven't looked at yet. Give yourself an uninterrupted 150 minutes. You don't use a calculator. Don't look at the solutions. Just you and the exam. See what you can do. Okay, that's a good way to practice yourself and just so you have an experience of working for 150 minutes straight on one exam. Okay, and I'd recommend doing this near the end of your preparation period after you've done lots of questions. Okay, so Tiger, sorry, I missed the chat there, but Tiger did just say it takes them 2 minutes on part A, 20 minutes on part B, and 120 minutes on part C. Okay, so that I could totally believe that. Okay, so again, do what you feel is right for you. So spend, go through one of these old exams, kind of keep track of how much time you're using on each section. Okay. Okay, so that comes to the end of my little spiel here. Good luck. I've provided a couple extra links here that might be useful. Here's the COMC homepage. Here's some frequently asked questions. So this might be useful for you if you want to take a look at those. Here's the link again for those past exams. And here's the link where the slides are available. So if you want to take some time just to write down this URL here, Okay, that should take you to a link to my Google Drive where I put these slides. Okay. All right, I think that's the end. Were there any questions?